Hi, I'm Vince Slaugh, coming to you from near Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, where I'm an assistant professor of service operations management. I study consistency of care in nursing homes. I've looked at bankers' boxes full of schedules and turned it into a mathematical problem of how to achieve good consistency of care in nursing homes. But I really only have the quantitative perspective. And I'm very excited to get to talk to someone who has more of a qualitative perspective and the experience to understand the human side of consistency of care. Denise, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Denise Boudreaux-Scott, and I am the president of Drive. We work with organizations in senior living, on culture, and basically how do you create organizations where people want to come to work and where residents want to come live.
Good. And yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about consistency of care over the years, and you've helped me understand it a lot. So I'm really excited for this conversation to help figure out the qualitative aspects about culture and how they relate to the consistency of care, the consistent assignment score that the Advancing Excellence campaign promoted, where you count up the number of different caregivers who care for each resident over the course of a month, and things like that. Could you give me a little bit of context and background about consistency of care? When did the profession start to recognize it as important?
Yeah, and so way back when I worked on some of that advancing excellence as part of a committee, and I think that was probably 15 years ago that we did some of that work, and probably even before that. To me, it really I'm a former nursing home administrator, and to me, it really was a foundation of person-centered care. So when we started talking about culture change in the organization that I worked, consistent assignment was something that we said just had to be part of who we are in order to provide any kind of individualized, personalized, not only care, but support of people.
Great. And scheduling plays an important role in that, naturally, as you're trying to figure out who works when and who works where
Huge.
with which residents. What practices in in creating a schedule have you seen differ between organizations that have a strong and maybe a weaker culture that helps them, helps those organizations either have a good or a poor consistency of care?
Yeah, I think in organizations that have strong, thriving cultures, that they're thinking about the relationships between the people that work there and the people that live there. They're thinking about the relationships even that coworkers have together. So as much as possible, trying to make that consistent. And as you know, that does take some, I don't even know if it's extra work, but it takes at least the eye to that, as opposed to taking an approach of we have a slot here, we have a slot here, we can fill somebody in there, fill somebody there. And it's sort of very haphazard. We don't care who goes where as long as the slot's filled. They're thinking much more in a thriving culture about the connection and relationships between people, staff to resident and staff to staff, both of those.
Okay, and I think about this as like a mathematical problem where you have an objective and constraints, and you have puzzle pieces that all need to fit together.
Mhm.
But in an organization with strong culture versus a weak culture, could the same person you know uh, be willing to structure their life differently, or would you be able to get maybe would someone who's working for an organization with a strong culture maybe be willing to work more or differently, or adjust their availability and flexibility in some way that you could that would actually influence the consistency that would the schedule would produce?
Yeah, and maybe, some people are very tired. They have children, perhaps they have, statistically, most people that work or direct caregivers have a second job. So we have all those factors. But what we do know in strong cultures are team members are more engaged. And when an employee is engaged, they come to work more often. There's less absenteeism. And so therefore you have less holes to fill. They get hurt less often on the job. So there's less back injuries, slips and falls, and all these other things that cause people to be off of work. People are more productive, which I always think is so interesting, but when they want to give their best and they want the organization to do their best, they work. They're more productive in their work, so they're working harder at work. I, in fact, had a nursing assistant that once said to me, I'd rather work with 4 of the right people than 6 of some of those other people. And that to me says it perfectly. You know, it's not, she didn't say productivity, she didn't say any of the words we're talking about, but she knew when her people were on, they together made a great team, as opposed to some of these other. Another point to consistency, though, right? Those are people that she probably worked with, knew, and when some other people start floating in, that kind of that relationship piece goes away. And so to answer your question, I know for a fact that you know, all of those numbers, absenteeism and productivity and safety incidences and all that, all those numbers look better in a strong culture. What I also know for a fact is how often staff will say, Vince had my back, I'm going to have his. So when you need something, someone called out, you're stuck, I'm going to help you as much as I possibly can. I also know if Vince never has my back and I feel like just constantly not respected by him, he doesn't even bother saying hello to me, I don't feel valued by him, he never says thank you. When push comes to shove and he needs me, I'm probably not going to be there for him.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, watching the scheduling process through the handwritten schedules, I mean, it looks like an incredibly complicated process. And if you get some flexibility because of, you know, people have participated in a strong culture and feel strongly about the organization's mission where they are, if they're willing to be flexible, that can just go a long ways. And the same thing with absenteeism. I've seen absenteeism really hit that consistency score hard. So if you can take it from, you know, 7% to 3% or something like that, that can really make a big difference. And, you know, maybe a 5 or 10 fewer different assistants going into a resident's room in a month. So, okay, great. And how, you know, some of that's about communication and, you know, some of the things you mentioned that, and when I've read some of the literature about best practices, it emphasizes the communication among the staff. What practices have you seen that facilitate communication well within an organization, and what's the value of that?
Yeah. So a couple things. I think, you know, when you have that consistency, you work with somebody, you have a strong relationship with them, you're going to communicate more, right? When you have somebody that's new, I mean, I know when I've worked with somebody new, you don't 100% trust them yet, right? You don't know what you can tell them, what you can't. And so all of those factors are going to result in us not communicating as much as we should be, or sharing as much information as we should be. So the consistent piece is going to help with certainly having a stronger connection with the person I'm working with. We've seen on every shift, staff having a daily get together. Some people call them huddles, where it's just a quick kind of maybe 10-minute conversation, not person by person, everyone that lives there, but going through sort of the highlights of what's happening. I like starting with a positive. That takes literally 2 seconds a person. So you're starting off your shift with everyone thinking of something good going on, which is kind of sets the tone for the day or the evening or the night. And the consistency also helps though with what I'm going to share in that daily huddle, because if I am caring for the same person, I know all these little idiosyncrasies. You know, if you know I'm a person, I'm not, that jumps out of bed in the morning, and then one day you come in and don't have as much pep as I normally have, you might ask me, right? What's going on? You might ask somebody else. Did you notice Denise, right? He kind of looks down today. What's going on, right? And so we can have those conversations and I would see this when I was an administrator all the time, because people, once we went to consistency, staff would know the residents so well, they would pick up on all of these little things that before kind of just no one ever noticed because there was too much in and out. So those couple of things for communication.
Okay, and is there what information shared that also could be about like the staffing requirement in the future, or with, you know, planning for the upcoming week or things like that could avoid, you know, it's things that happen that would cause inconsistency in the care?
Yeah. So, you know, we found it was just insanity for us to be doing a schedule for people who worked together and knew their residents best and what they needed. And here we are in an office someplace trying to make a schedule. I mean, it just made no sense. It never made sense to me. For years before we even went to consistent assignment. But so for staff to have their role in playing and saying, okay, this is what I think the assignment should be. And everybody, I did that with, when we first moved to this process, I did that with everybody in my office with Post-it notes all over the wall, like a beautiful vine. And everybody kind of agreed on this is what we're going to do together. But at the same time, you have to think about what happens in a month or maybe a few weeks even. Somebody passes away, the person who comes and lives there now needs more support. Or somebody maybe has a stroke and they need more support, or they're sick or whatever, and whatever they have. So we have to definitely have communication between staff members where that's trustful, that's open, and that they're transparent with each other, so they can be talking about things like, hey, Vince, you know what, like right now, before I was all right 2 weeks ago, but so much has changed with the people I care for and support. We need to sit down and kind of go over what we're going to do as a team, and to be able to have that communication is incredibly important.
Great. So you can, get more staff buy-in on the schedule, or also have the staff make suggestions if the schedule doesn't make sense, or they might see opportunities to improve the schedule and make it more consistent themselves.
Yeah, and they're driving it. And I was always fascinated by, people that, there's some people that just had, were more challenging for the staff to support than others. But there was always somebody that would step up and say, you know what? I get along well with that resident. Like I'll take care of that person, or together, let's do it. And so it always surprised me, but there was always somebody that did step up to do that. And if they don't, even having two people together help care for and support a person. So it's not that burden just doesn't come to one person, because that's probably the most common thing I hear is, what about burnout for staff that are caring for someone who's, kind of tough to care for? What happens? But with consistency, when you know those little idiosyncrasies, you're much more able to individualize your care and support of that person. So maybe they're not going to have as many issues or problems or concerns than they had before, because you really get to know them as a person. And that is certainly what I found out.
Okay, so that's sort of the idea that maybe consistency leads to more consistency because you don't have as much burnout, or you have people more satisfied with their jobs. Okay, that's all really helpful. Anything else from your experiences that other strategies for consistency of care that you want to share?
The only thing I would say is that for people that sort of were really challenged and said, one particular story, I remember I had somebody who said, I don't want to take care of the same group of residents. I want to be able to float and so forth. And we always needed somebody that would have to fill in here or there. And I said, no problem. But as soon as a spot opened up a couple months later in the consistent, she said, I want that spot. I want to have that consistency. She was seeing the difference in the connections between people. And you know what? Caregivers get into this work because they're compassionate, because they're caring at heart. And so that connection, those relationships are super important to them. And when you're just floating people in and out and they're not building those relationships, you're working against what is important to your staff at their very core.
Great. Thanks so much, Denise. This is really great hearing your perspective. Look forward to continuing to have conversations with you to find solutions for the industry related to consistency of care. And hopefully this conversation is helpful to practitioners who are figuring out this problem, and also any academics who are curious about what's about this idea of consistency.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for doing the work that you do in our field and the research piece and helping us through all of that work. It's tremendously important to us.
All right. Thank you, Denise.